Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take on the really challenging stuff, the dense articles, the critical theory, the research that's shaping our world, and we try to boil it all down into a story that actually makes sense.
And our mission today is, well, it's a big one. It's maybe the most ambitious deep dive we've ever tried to tackle. We are unpacking the foundational tension of modern life.
Yeah, this conflict that you feel everywhere. It's the battle between this relentless drive for functional efficiency.
And on the other side, the absolutely fundamental human need for meaning,
Yeah.
for purpose, for, a sense of self-worth.
We're calling it the existential itch. It's that nagging feeling in the back of your mind that maybe what you're doing doesn't really matter, that your skills, the ones you spent years building, might be, well, functionally irrelevant.
And it's a crisis that's hitting us from two directions at once. They're sort of feeding into each other. First, you got the immediate crisis, the crisis of the present.
The one we're all living through right now.
Exactly. Millions of people right now are doing jobs that are, for all intents and purposes, entirely pointless. The whole problem of bullshit jobs. And this is work that's tied directly to our identity, which causes profound psychological damage.
And then there's the second front, the future crisis, the one that, frankly, is terrifying. It's the AI problem.
Right. Because researchers are now, they're starting to really accept this as a serious possibility that highly skilled white-collar workers could become economically worthless.
And if our entire sense of self is built on being productive, on engaging with the world through our work, what happens then? I mean, the loss of purpose is just catastrophic. It feels like an existential threat.
It is. And to really get our heads around how we got here, we have to name the enemy. We have to identify the mechanism, the conceptual villain that's driving this whole process.
And we're pulling this villain's name directly from the source material, from critical theory. We're calling it the hyper-rational system.
And this system, it's not just a technology. It's not just capitalism. It's a kind of logic, a self-sustaining logic that goes all the way back to Max Weber and gets fully developed by thinkers like Jürgen Habermas.
A logic where abstract formal rules claim absolute priority over everything else.
Over context, over ethics, over, human reason. And what we're going to do today is trace how this system, with its obsession with functional purity, actively begins to colonize and really consume human meaning, community, and even identity itself.
So the sources we're pulling from today they're complex. We're synthesizing ideas from the Frankfurt School, from Habermas. We're looking at these huge philosophical debates between figures like Sartre and Levi-Strauss.
And we're connecting all of that history to very contemporary reports on AI and the future of work from places like Brookings and the Walrus.
Our goal is to give you the clear, dramatic story of how this hyper-rational system quietly took over everything.
Okay, so let's start with the contemporary crisis, because this is where all that philosophy crashes into our miserable Monday morning. Before we get into the engine room of the theory, we need to feel the damage that's being done right now on the ground.
And that leads us straight to David Graeber's work on bullshit jobs.
Right.
What was so groundbreaking about his work was that it just flew in the face of basic economic assumptions. In a truly efficient capitalist system, you'd think all these useless jobs would have been eliminated ages ago. But he argued that the move to a post-industrial society didn't bring more leisure or more efficiency.
It brought something else entirely.
It produced a new kind of work, a kind of work that's deeply estranged, alienated, not because it's hard, backbreaking labor, but because it's completely lost that old industrial ideal of, making something tangible.
So much of modern work isn't about producing a thing you can hold. It's administrative, it's managerial, it's consultative. And because of that, it becomes superfluous. It becomes inefficient. And a lot of the time, frankly, it becomes narcissistic. This is what he called the bullshit economy. Graeber's theory was that, maybe over half of all the work in our society is fundamentally meaningless, especially in those bloated administrative sectors.
And it's important to stress this isn't just a minor annoyance. It's not just about being bored at your desk.
No. The sources are very clear on this. The destructive part is the profound psychological violence. You have a person who knows, deep down, that their job is entirely pointless.
But their self-worth, their identity, society tells them it's all tied up in that job.
Exactly. So you're basically being paid to lie to yourself, to lie to your family, to lie to society about the fact that you have a purpose.
That phrase, being paid to lie to yourself, that really cuts to the bone, because this is where the philosophy gets sharp. The worker gets trapped in this state of what the sources call doing as if.
Yes, and that pulls from the philosopher Harry Frankfurt's concept of bullshit. A bullshitter isn't necessarily a liar. A liar knows the truth and is trying to hide it. The bullshitter.
Yeah.
They just don't care what the truth is.
They're indifferent to it.
Completely indifferent. Their only concern is performing their function within the system. So in the context of a job, the employee has to constantly pretend their work is useful. They build this whole fake and phony reality for themselves and for everyone around them.
And the sources say this it grates at their humanity. It's a constant low-level moral compromise you have to make every single day just to keep your job.
And to make this really concrete, we can look at the different types of these jobs Graeber identified. His taxonomy really shows how this meaninglessness is, well, it's manufactured by the system to keep itself stable.
Let's run through them because I think everyone listening will see someone they know or maybe themselves in these archetypes. First up, you have the flunkies.
Flunkies. Their entire role exists just for status reinforcement. They're there to make superiors feel important. The executive who has 3 assistants to manage a task that one person could do.
And the psychological damage there is your worth is entirely derivative.
It's total estrangement.
Yeah.
Your value doesn't come from your contribution. It just comes from validating someone else's ego, someone else's place in the hierarchy.
Okay, next up. The duct tapers. I love this term.
It's so vivid, isn't it? Duct tapers are the people who manage flaws. They spend their days applying temporary fixes to systemic problems that everyone knows are permanent.
The programmer who spends all day patching some ancient piece of code that the company should have replaced a decade ago.
But they won't because of budget or politics or whatever.
Yeah.
So the duct taper knows the problem is going to come back tomorrow or next week. They know the system is broken at a fundamental level, but they are only paid to patch the hole, not to fix the leak.
The psychological cost of that must be just this constant feeling of futility.
Immense frustration.
Yeah.
And then you have the box tickers.
Ugh, the box tickers. We all know them.
Their job is ritualistic validation. They exist to create the appearance of useful activity. This reinforces that fake and phony reality we were talking about because the work is purely for show. It's designed to satisfy some internal metric or some external auditor, but it has no real-world utility.
They're also the more actively harmful roles, right? Like the goons.
Yes. The goons are focused on institutional aggression. Think of lobbyists or aggressive corporate lawyers or telemarketers. Their job is to harm or deceive other people on behalf of the organization. And that creates a huge amount of moral dissonance for the worker.
And finally, the taskmasters.
The taskmasters are the ones who create pointless work for other people. They're the middle managers who invent new layers of bureaucracy, who assign tasks that don't need to be done. They are the human face of administrative bloat.
So when you look at all these roles, this landscape of uselessness, you have to ask the big question, why? Why does the system keep these jobs around? Why doesn't the drive for efficiency just get rid of them?
And the answer is really unsettling. It's because the system's main goal isn't human utility. It's not about making our lives better. Its imperative is stability. It's organizational maintenance.
Even if that stability is built on a foundation of human meaninglessness.
Especially then. The system intentionally manufactures this widespread, collective psychological state of anomie, this feeling of aimlessness, of normative decay in its population.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back a little on that. The idea that this is a pathological consequence. Are you really saying that the system wants us to do pointless work? That just sounds completely counterintuitive. The whole point of a hyper-rational system should be efficiency, right?
That's the core paradox we have to wrestle with. Think about it from the system's perspective. What's the biggest threat to its stability? A happy, fulfilled populace with lots of free time to think about how things could be different. Or
a stressed, busy population that's too preoccupied to cause trouble.
Exactly. Real efficiency might mean mass layoffs, social upheaval, people questioning the very foundations of the economy. That would threaten system survival. So by keeping everyone busy, even with pointless tasks, the system channels our disruptive human need for a meaningful life.
Into something safe.
Yeah.
Into administrative compliance.
It forces our need for purpose to express itself in the language of function. The system essentially buys social peace at the cost of our psychological well-being.
That is a deeply cynical but powerful idea.
And it leads right to the mic drop quote from the sources on this point. The analysis demonstrates that the rise of uselessness is not an accident of post-industrial society, but the direct pathological consequence of the successful colonization of the life world by functionally autonomous systems.
So the system needs you busy. It doesn't really care if your output is zero.
It just needs you compliant.
And this whole dynamic, this pathology of uselessness, is about to get a massive shot of adrenaline from technology. The problem is shifting from being forced to do pointless things to maybe not being needed to do anything at all.
Which brings us to the speed and scale of AI. You know, when we look at past technological revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, automation in factories, those were brutal. They created massive inequality and painful transitions. But in the long run, they tended to create more jobs than they destroyed.
And the sources are arguing that this time might be different.
The historical trajectory might not hold. And the reason is about the type of automation.
What's the difference?
Earlier tech was narrow. A mechanical loom could replace a weaver, but it couldn't, do your taxes. It was disruptive in one specific sector. AI, on the other hand, is capable of automating core human cognitive functions.
Analysis, pattern recognition, specialized communication.
All of it. And it can do it across almost every industry at the same time. The result is what the sources call extremely rapid labor substitution.
And it's not just hitting the factory floor. It's not just the low-skill jobs anymore. We're seeing what's being called the skilled worker paradox.
That's right. The people who are most vulnerable now are the ones with specialized knowledge. The people who went to college for years, who have decades of experience.
Yeah.
Programmers, doctors, managers, analysts.
Why them?
Because a machine can acquire that same specialized knowledge, and it can act on it faster and more reliably than a human can. The very knowledge that was supposed to make you secure is now what makes you replaceable.
This completely upends the standard policy solution for automation, which is always, we'll just retrain people.
Yeah, the sources lay out 3 really solid reasons why simply retraining workers probably isn't going to be enough this time.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is just simple job availability. I mean, if you displace 1 million skilled workers, it's not enough to teach them a new skill. You have to have 1 million new, desirable, stable, skilled jobs for them to move into. And the evidence suggests that after these big tech shocks, the number of those good jobs actually shrinks for a while.
So you're retraining people for jobs that might not even exist in the numbers required.
Or that are about to be automated themselves. And that's the second problem, anticipation difficulty. It's incredibly hard for the people running these reskilling programs to guess what the labor market will look like in 5 or 10 years.
You end up training people for yesterday's jobs.
Exactly. You train someone to move from one automation susceptible field right into another one. It's a vicious cycle. And there's this foggy understanding around the whole thing. We know what AI is capable of, but we don't know when companies will actually invest the capital to implement it at scale. It makes planning almost impossible.
And the third reason?
This is the most critical one. It's a fundamental trajectory change. If AI causes a dramatic machine replacement of decent work, if it happens fast and it happens to a lot of skilled people at once, the whole system just gets overwhelmed.
Yeah.
The transition period is so chaotic that retraining efforts become, functionally useless. You can't bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon.
So this philosophical problem we started with, the meaninglessness of pointless work, it morphs into something much scarier. It's no longer a critique of bad labor. It's the potential for total economic worthlessness, a catastrophic loss of purpose.
And that forces us to ask, okay, what is the intellectual framework? What is the system that allows functional stability to completely trump human purpose? To really get that, to understand how functional efficiency becomes this kind of self-sustaining monster, we have to go to the source code. We have to look at the architecture of critical theory, specifically the work of Jürgen Habermas.
Right, and his huge magnum opus, the theory of communicative action.
Yes, and you can see Habermas's whole project is this grand attempt to resolve big philosophical conflicts. Facts versus validity, and for our purposes, the most important one, system versus life world.
That's the core binary.
That's the core binary. He sets up this fundamental opposition between 2 different realms of social life. And he argues that the central crisis of modernity, the thing we're all feeling, is the uncoupling of system from life world.
Okay, so let's define the terms. Let's start with side A, the life world, the realm of meaning. Give us the simple cocktail party definition.
The life world is the back. It's the background. It's the informal, everyday world of taken for granted certainties. It's your culture, your shared norms, the unspoken rules you follow without even thinking about them.
It's your family dinner table, your neighborhood, the local coffee shop.
Exactly. It's the realm of genuine human interaction.
Yeah.
And it's coordinated through a very specific mechanism.
Not through commands or money.
No. The life world is coordinated through what Habermas calls communicative action. This is when you interact with someone with the goal of reaching a mutual understanding. You're committed to the force of the better argument. You give reasons, you listen to reasons, and you try to reach a genuine consensus.
So when we're planning one of these deep dives and we're actually debating the best way to explain a concept that's communicative action, we're raising claims. Is this factually right? Is this the best way to frame it for the listener? And we hash it out. It's messy. It takes time.
But it builds real consensus. And the life world has these three components, these resources it uses to reproduce itself. There's culture, our shared knowledge. Society, our norms and institutions. And personality, our individual identities and motivations. And the colonization we're talking about is a direct attack on all three.
Okay, so that's the life world. Now for the villain. Side B, the system, the realm of pure function.
The system is the opposite. It's the formally organized, abstract spheres of action that operate independently of the life world. It's the state bureaucracy. It's the capitalist economy. Its goal is not understanding. Its goal is success.
And its driving force is what he calls strategic action.
Right. Strategic action is about competition. It's about rational opponents trying to achieve their own self-interested goals. You're not trying to understand the other person. You're taking a purely instrumental, objectifying attitude toward them. Think of a chess match or a high-stakes corporate negotiation. You only care about the outcome.
But the terrifying genius of this framework is the mechanism the system uses to win. It's what Habermas calls the steering media.
This is the hidden weapon. It's the system's cheat code. Steering media are these specialized, functionally pure tools that allow the system to just bypass that whole messy, time-consuming process of reaching an understanding.
They replace rational agreement with something much simpler.
And Habermas says there are really only two genuine steering media: money and power. Okay, let's break those down. How does money work as a steering medium for the economic system?
Okay, think of money as a universal translator that doesn't care about meaning. In the life world, if a community wants to build a park, they have to talk. They have to discuss values, aesthetics, what's best for the kids. It requires consensus.
Money just cuts through all of that.
Completely. In a monetary transaction, your motivation is purely empirical. You want the positive sanction. You want the money. You don't have to agree on why the product is valuable or why the job is meaningful. You just need the transaction to happen. It replaces the need for agreement with a simple exchange.
And power, the medium of the state or the administrative system, it works in a similar way. Same logic, but it operates through command linked to a negative sanction, the threat of punishment. The IRS doesn't try to reach a mutual understanding with you about the fairness of the tax code.
No, it just enforces the rules.
It just enforces the rules. Like money, it allows for an objectifying, success-oriented attitude that replaces the need for genuine consensus.
So the system only speaks the language of money and power. What happens when it tries to solve problems that belong to the life world? That's the colonization thesis, right?
That's the colonization thesis.
Yeah.
It's what happens when the systemic logic of money and power starts to invade areas of life that depend on things like shared values, norms, and consensus to function properly.
The system's logic starts to displace those consensual mechanisms.
And it replaces them with its own media-steered coordination. The result, Habermas says, is the disintegration of life relations.
But hold on, why is that automatically a crisis? I mean, money and power are really efficient. Isn't the system just cleaning up the messiness of the life world? It sounds like an upgrade.
It sounds like an upgrade, but it's a crisis because the system's logic is it's blind. It cannot process meaning. It can't understand values or genuine human care. So when you try to solve a life world problem, like poverty or mental health, using only the binary code of money and power, you end up destroying the very social bonds that give life meaning.
And the sources say this colonization happens through the roles we play every day.
Yes, it's channeled through our social roles.
Yeah.
The employee, the consumer, the citizen, and critically, the client.
Let's focus on that client role, because Habermas looked at this in the context of the welfare state, the phenomenon he called juridification.
He saw this fundamental dilemma. Welfare programs are designed with a good intention to help people, to foster social integration. But the mechanism they use, a bureaucratic, individualized, media-steered system, actually promotes social disintegration.
That's the welfare state dilemma. So a program meant to help with mental health, for example, it requires you to fill out forms to meet certain criteria. It operates on system logic.
Right. And that administrative logic is totally at odds with the program's real therapeutic goal, which is to build independence and self-reliance. A life world goal. The system forces a human problem into a box that can be measured and managed.
And in the process, it can weaken the community.
Exactly. By delivering aid through these formalized top-down rules, it weakens the readiness of solidary communities. Your neighbors don't feel the need to help you anymore because the bureaucracy has taken over.
So the attempt to solve a life world problem with system logic actually creates a new, deeper life world problem.
And now we can loop all the way back to bullshit jobs. They are a perfect textbook example of this colonization. The economic system needs stable, compliant workers. It solves this problem by colonizing the employee role. It takes our human need for meaning and forces it into the system's language of function, creating a pointless job that is functionally necessary for stability, even as it hollows out our sense of self-worth.
Okay, so this hydro-rational system, this logic, it didn't just pop out of nowhere. It has really deep historical and philosophical roots. And to get it, we have to go back to the intellectual godfather of bureaucracy itself, Max Weber.
Weber is the starting point. He was trying to figure out what made the modern West so unique.
Yeah.
And he identified this broad historical process he called Occidental rationalism. It's basically the origin story for why we're all obsessed with efficiency.
And this idea of rationalization for him was massive. It covered everything, right?
Everything. The rise of modern science, the development of predictable, systematized law, the creation of bureaucratic governments with technically trained officials, and of course the capitalist enterprise with its rational organization of wage labor. He was describing the world reorganizing itself around the principles of calculability and predictability.
But Habermas and the sources here draw a really crucial distinction. They critique Weber for focusing too much on the path that modernization actually took and for missing the paths it could have taken.
That's the key. Weber focused almost entirely on what's called instrumental rationality. That's the cold, hard, means-end calculation. What is the most efficient way to achieve my goal? It's the logic of the factory and the bureaucracy.
But he missed the other side of reason.
He missed what Habermas would later call communicative reason, the rational potential left unexhausted. The potential for human beings to rationally coordinate their lives through mutual understanding, not just through calculation.
And this critique of instrumental reason was the absolute core of what the original Frankfurt School theorists were doing. People like Horkheimer and Adorno in their book Dialectic of Enlightenment.
They took Weber's observations and followed them to their most chilling conclusion. They argued that the Enlightenment, by embracing this ruthless instrumental logic to dominate both nature and other humans, paradoxically turns back into myth. It becomes its own kind of prison,
The result being what they called totally administered lives.
where individuals just completely adapt themselves to the efficient logic of the state and the corporation, and they lose any capacity for spontaneous freedom or critical thought.
So the hyper-rational system we're talking about today is really instrumental reason on steroids. It's the ultimate expression of that efficient, calculating logic that the Frankfurt School warned us about nearly a century ago.
It is. It's the intellectual DNA for why we value optimization over genuine consensus.
Now, before we bring this all the way into the age of AI, there's an even deeper philosophical layer we have to touch on. It's about where we even get our sense of meaning in the first place. This is the huge 20th century showdown between existentialism and structuralism.
This debate is so important because it gets at the fundamental question: do we create our own meaning as individuals, or do we just inherit it from the systems and structures we're born into?
Let's start with Jean-Paul Sartre and existentialism.
Existentialism is radically individualist. It starts and ends with the lone agent. Sartre's famous line is, "Man is nothing else than what he makes himself." The individual is the sole source of meaning. Freedom, for Sartre, is this radical ability to negate your current situation and impose your own meaning onto the world through your choices.
There's a famous example from his play, Dirty Hands, that makes this really clear. The main character kills someone, seemingly out of petty jealousy, but then he chooses to reframe that act and his own death as a profound political statement.
Right. And the existentialist reading is that he, through his own free will, transformed a meaningless crime into a heroic sacrifice. The agent imposes meaning on the situation. The situation doesn't impose meaning on the agent.
Okay, now let's contrast that sharply with Claude Lévi-Strauss and structuralism.
Structuralism says the exact opposite. It says this focus on the individual meaning giver is basically a scientific dead end. Meaning does not come from the individual. It comes from the hidden unconscious structure itself, from the network of relationships of differences and similarities between things.
So the meaning of an action isn't about your personal intention. It's about where that action fits within the pre-existing grid of cultural rules and categories.
Precisely. Lévi-Strauss famously said, Sartre was a prisoner of his cogito, of his own individual thoughts. He was mistaking his personal sense of freedom for universal law. For a structuralist, the deep rules of language and culture operate unconsciously, way beyond the individual's control. So Hugo's final act in that play gets its meaning not from his choice, but from the ancient structure of myths about sacrifice and redemption that our culture already provides.
So you have the individual as the creator of meaning versus the impersonal system as the creator of meaning. That sets the stage perfectly for where we are now.
It does, because then you get the post-structuralists, thinkers like Foucault and Derrida. They took the structuralist idea of hidden systems, but they focused on the gaps and the contradictions within those systems. They asked the next question: how do we come to believe in the meanings our systems give us? How do we take that leap of faith to believe that our rational theories, our rational systems, are actually complete and perfect?
And that connects this whole philosophical history right back to our hyper-rational system.
It's a perfect link. The system claims it's legitimate because of its pure, formal logic, its structural perfection and efficiency. But the post-structuralists show us that this claim is always built on a kind of faith, a leap that papers over its own internal gaps and uncertainties.
So if the system is now the ultimate meaning giver, as Levi-Strauss might argue, but that system is run by a purely instrumental AI, as Weber and the Frankfurt School feared, and that system's logic is fundamentally incomplete, as the post-structuralists showed, what on earth does that do to the poor human being trying to find their purpose within it?
That is the question of the algorithmic age.
Right, so if instrumental reason found its perfect form in the industrial age on the assembly line, what happens when it's embodied in a machine that claims to know you better than you know yourself? This brings us right to the modern psychological version of the colonization thesis. The sources are calling it the algorithmic self.
The algorithmic self is this new form of identity that's co-created. It's a partnership between your own consciousness and the feedback you're getting from machines. AI isn't just a tool anymore. It's this external, data-driven mirror that doesn't just reflect who you are, it actively tries to shape and optimize who you should be.
And this is where that colonization of the personality component of the life world becomes so incredibly acute. We're seeing what feels like a quiet collapse of introspection and agency.
Think about how we traditionally developed self-awareness. It was hard internal work. You kept a journal, you went to therapy, you had long, difficult conversations, you reflected.
All of that is now being outsourced.
It's being quietly substituted by algorithmic systems. Your fitness tracker, your meditation app, these new emotionally intelligent chatbots. They don't just record your data. They give you these neat, prepackaged functional summaries of your moods, your behaviors, even your moral choices.
So we're taking the most subjective, messy human thing imaginable, our inner life, and handing it over to an external system that runs on pure functional logic. What does that do to our ability to make real decisions for ourselves?
Well, what starts as a helpful suggestion often slides into being the default direction. The algorithm is built to optimize, and optimization is a form of that functional purity we keep talking about. Over time, its suggestions aren't just seen as options. They become the default path.
And that starts to shape how you even think about choice itself.
It does. You stop asking yourself, what do we really truly want? And you start asking, what does the optimized version of me want according to the data?
Which leads right into the dark side of predictive personalization. We all love that our systems are so efficient, that they show us exactly what we want to see. But the hidden cost is that we lose the chance for genuine discovery.
Exactly. The algorithms are constantly curating your reality, reinforcing what you've already expressed interest in. They don't just suggest what you might like. On a long enough timeline, they start to define what you like. They create this perfect, efficient, but very narrow bubble for you.
They shrink the scope of your world.
And they constrain you to this prepackaged, optimized version of your past self. So instead of using your cultural and personal resources to grow and expand, the system is using them to make you more predictable and therefore more manageable.
And the logic driving all of this is what we've been calling functional purity. Can we just define that one more time really clearly?
Functional purity is that moment when the narrow, formal requirements of logic completely eclipse the broad, substantive requirements of reason. The system's number one priority is its own stability, its own efficiency, its own predictability.
Even if achieving that stability means being destructive on a human level.
Yes, the AI, which is the ultimate expression of this pure instrumental logic, sees no value in the messy, inefficient, human process of self-discovery or consensus building.
Yeah.
It only values the output that it can measure and optimize.
And that raises some huge ethical and existential questions. I mean, if knowing yourself is now an externalized, data-driven process, who really owns your identity? Can you be an authentic person if yourself is being constantly tweaked and optimized by invisible code?
We've gone beyond a crisis of meaning in our work to a crisis of authenticity in our very selves.
So what's the answer? What do the sources propose as a way to fight back?
The only real defense is algorithmic literacy.
Which isn't just about knowing how to code.
Not at all. It's the capacity for critical self-reflection. It's the ability to step back and ask, how is this algorithm mediating my perception of the world and of myself? It's about understanding the system's functional logic, instead of just blindly accepting its outputs as truth. Without that critical distance, we just become puppets shaped by the machine. We lose the ability to be the authors of our own lives.
Ah.
Okay, so to pull this all together, this whole journey from Max Weber's rationalization to the crisis of the algorithmic self, let's use one final master analogy to illustrate this dynamic between the system and the life world.
A high-tech metaphor for the hyper-rational system.
Think of this system as a perfectly optimized, self-referential piece of software. In systems theory, they'd call it an autopoietic system. It's operatively closed. It can only process information using its own internal binary codes.
And those codes are money and power.
Money and power. It's like a corporate firewall. It's designed to only allow traffic through very specific, predefined ports. Any communication that doesn't fit that protocol, anything about meaning or values or community, it's either discarded or it's blocked.
So when this functionally pure system colonizes our life world, our fundamental human needs are forced to translate themselves into the system's language. They have to squeeze through that firewall.
Yes, your need for meaning has to become productivity. Your sense of value has to become a measurable metric. Your community has to become a bureaucratic client relationship.
And so meaninglessness, whether it's bullshit jobs or that feeling of digital anatomy, it's not a bug in the system. It's not a mistake.
It is a core feature. It's the direct pathological consequence that is necessary to keep the system stable and pure. It needs to keep us busy, subordinate, and distracted within its frame. The easiest way to bypass genuine consensus is to make sure we're all too busy and stressed with pointless work to ever demand it.
So after all of this, what's the big takeaway for you listening at home as you face this future of AI acceleration?
I think the sources show us that the great challenge of our time isn't just about technology or efficiency. It's about defending the human spheres, our values, our norms, our culture. It's about making sure they maintain their own rational, communicative power against this totalizing force of instrumental calculation. We have to constantly be on the lookout for those subtle ways the system is colonizing our lives and blocking our potential for genuine freedom.
So let us leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on. We've talked about how Habermas saw that even our best institutions, things designed for good, can become functional tools of the state and undermine real democracy.
So if the hyper-rational system's stability requires keeping all of us busy and preoccupied with purposeless, meaningless labor, if it needs the psychological noise of the bullshit economy to keep functioning smoothly,
Then what is the hidden functional connection between the ubiquity of useless work and the stability of the political order? What deeper purpose does our collective manufactured uselessness actually serve in the maintenance of power?
that is the ultimate question the hyper-rational system poses to us. Efficiency at the cost of existence. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We hope this gives you a new lens, a new set of tools to analyze the algorithmic world that we all inhabit. Until next time, keep digging.